Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Stories. First up, we have Following My Family by Affectionate March 889. Over the years, my family, and primarily my dad, has felt there is a ghost that follows us. I'm the only skeptical one in the group who doesn't really buy 99% of it. More on that in a bit. My dad always used to say that weird, unexplained things would happen around the house. Lights turning back on after leaving rooms, the laundry machines running on its own with no one else in the house, that sort of thing. My sister said she used to hear people walking in the house when she was home alone. My mom would just recount my sister sleepwalking, but mostly just talking nonsense about homework, about her friends. And I, at least as far as my dad and sister were concerned, were convinced they were experiencing a combination of electrical issues, forgetfulness, and the choice of living in a semi-detached house, in that the walls are always thinner than you think. This sort of stuff has happened from house to house, mostly in the last house we all lived in before we moved out as adult children. And like I said, I mostly chalked it up to fabrication until the last time I ever stepped foot into our last home. Warning, this isn't really a scary story, but feels paranormal or ghost adjacent at the very least. When my dad moved in with my stepmom, he kept the house for a few years to renovate before reselling. So it sat empty most weeks and became a crash pad of sorts when my sister or I were back from the city to visit. On my final visit, which was primarily to pick up the last couple of totes of my belongings like trophies, yearbooks, the stuff you don't bring to college, I noticed the power had clearly gone out. The clock on the microwave and the oven were flashing on 5 p.m. Not exactly, but can't remember the exact minute. As I made my way throughout the house, I noticed the digital clock in the guest room was on the same time, flashing. It took me a minute to realize that typically these types of clocks are synced with a battery, and when the power returns, the correct time should be flashing. But that wasn't the case. They were both just stuck flashing on a certain time around 5 p.m. Then our grandfather clock was stuck on the same time, and I literally couldn't believe it. I texted my dad about it, thinking he'd get a kick out of it. Finally, I was indulging his stories. And he more or less said, "Oh yeah, that always happens. I hate that. So annoying." I packed up my things and went back downtown to my apartment. A few days later, I was looking through the boxes and found my old Darth Vader alarm clock, which, by the way, very cool. It probably hadn't been used in 20 years, and it was in such bad shape that you could see the digital numbers kind of burned into the screen. You know that broken calculator look, screen bleep sort of vibe? I didn't even realize until several minutes later that the time permanently fixed and damaged was the same as all the clocks in the old house, and to make things almost storybook perfect, I was about 5 minutes off from that time in that moment, which would mean the first time I glanced at it out of the box was possibly the same time. No experiences for me since, but it made me realize maybe my family wasn't full of it after all. My dad still says little things happen all the years and 2 houses later. Anyone else had an encounter or repeat encounter that wasn't contained to any one place? It is kind of refreshing to have the kid not believe the parents. It's usually the other way around. Okay, story number 2. I heard my friends laughing outside my room at 3 a.m., but they were asleep. By 3 a.m. listener. This all happened last night, and I still can't explain it. I went to bed around 12, and I wasn't sleepy, so I stayed on my phone watching Netflix. Around 1:30, or maybe closer to 2, the power went out suddenly, and everything just went completely dark. At first it was quiet, but within a few minutes it started raining heavily, the kind of rain where you can hear it hitting the windows hard and loud, thunder and occasional lightning. My room was locked, and I was alone. I turned on my phone flashlight and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I had this really uncomfortable feeling like someone was watching me, and at one point, I even imagined a face when my eyes were closed, and it freaked me out enough to keep them open. Then I started hearing something. At first I thought it was just the rain, but it became clearer. It sounded like 2 people talking, then laughing. I froze because it sounded exactly like my friends Tara and Tanya. Their voices were so clear that I didn't even question it at first. It genuinely felt like they were sitting in the hall right outside my room, just talking and laughing normally. I remember feeling a bit relieved, like, okay, they're awake too. I almost got up to open the door and go sit with them, but something felt off about it. "Join us." I don't know how to explain it. The storm was loud and the whole place was dark, and for some reason I just didn't want to open the door, so I stayed on my bed and just listened. The voices didn't stop immediately. They continued for a while. I don't know exactly how long, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, maybe more. They sounded completely normal the whole time. At some point, I must have dozed off for a short while. When I woke up again, it was around 5 a.m. The power was back on because the fan was running, but the light in my room was off. What bothered me was that I clearly remember the light being on when the power went out. I seriously don't remember turning it off at all. I got up and went to the hall. The light was on, and Tara was sleeping on the sofa, and Tanya wasn't there. I woke Tara up and told her to go inside and sleep. Everything felt normal again, like nothing had happened. In the morning, I asked Tanya what they were doing last night, because I heard both of them talking and laughing for quite a while, and she looked genuinely confused and told me she didn't wake up at all. She said she didn't even know there was a power cut. That's the part that's bothering me the most. Because I know what I heard. It wasn't vague or silent, it was clear. It sounded exactly like them. And for a moment I was so close to opening the door. I don't know what I would have seen if I did. Okay, story number 3 is the time something grabbed my hair and had feet pointing opposite directions. By Shama123. I've had a series of encounters and experiences my typically rational mind cannot explain. So let me share one of the worst experiences I've had thus far. My family is from Bangladesh, but I was born in the US and moved around all over because my father was a diplomat. Every summer we would go back to Bangladesh to visit family. My maternal grandmother's family had a grand estate that has been in their family for generations in the village. The estate was magnificent and a sight to behold, but unfortunately, from what I'm told now, due to sibling rivalry, the estate had been left to disrepair and lays vacant most of its days. The estate was built by one of the feudal lords of the area during the beginning of the British occupation. Yeah, sorry about that. And the house was huge with massive ceilings and stained glass windows. We looked forward to escaping the hustle of the city to go there every summer. This particular estate was one filled with stories from my grandmother's family members and the village locals. I always chalked them up to local folklore, but then it happened to me. When I was 12, I am now 30, we went to the estate as we usually did. It was very late, and all the adults had gone to bed already. The only ones who were awake were me and 2 of my cousins. We were sitting by the house courtyard, talking and catching up. There are thick woods and 2 large ponds beyond the courtyard, so there are always noises of critters, crickets, and other animal activity. All of a sudden everything stopped. It's as if someone pressed the mute button. It was very noticeable that it just became very quiet, and my cousins and I stopped talking. We didn't even have time to register when all of a sudden I see my cousin, who's sitting across from me, frown her face in pure horror. She sucked in her breath and sat still, not even blinking. I asked her what's wrong, and she whispered that there was someone behind her. I could see very clearly that there was no one behind her. She moved her pupils from left to right when my cousin, who was sitting next to me, sucked in her breath, looking horrified. She confirmed that something was behind her. Once again I saw nothing, and slowly I felt someone behind me. You know when someone is standing next to you or behind you? The hairs in the back of my neck prickled up, and I felt a little movement of the wind, as if someone heavy was slowly walking behind me. Then it stopped to my left. There was a faint smell of rotting flesh mixed in with what smelled like floral essential oils. Then it happened. Something lightly touched my hair and grabbed a strand. At that moment, I grabbed both of my cousins, who also saw a strand of my hair floating up on its own for a second, and ran to one of the bedrooms where one of my grandmother's brothers was sleeping. He was dead asleep, but we closed the door shut behind us and crawled under his bed. We didn't even want to breathe too loudly. but we watched the shadows slowly drag across the floor outside the door. Then it stood outside, waiting. We confirmed later that it wasn't just me imagining, but all three of us saw 2 pairs of feet outside the door, and one foot was pointing towards the door, while the other was pointing in the opposite direction. The feet looked like it belonged to a woman. It stood there for what felt like hours, but in reality it was only a few minutes. Then we saw the figure move back from the door, and heavy footsteps slowly walking away out into the courtyard. After it was gone, none of us spoke a single word or even climbed out from under the bed. When I finally volunteered and shook my great-uncle up, we told him we were scared and asked him to take us to the room we were sleeping in, which was on the other side of the estate. Shockingly enough, he didn't question us, just asked if we saw something. I nodded and he got up, opened his bedroom door to check the hallway, and escorted us back to the room we were staying at. We didn't sleep all night, not only from the experience we just had, but also from the cries of the property livestock. They all just started screaming in unison, something they weren't doing before, and the local stray dogs started barking too. The noise was so loud that it woke up others in our room, and everyone knew that whatever was happening didn't feel right. After 10 minutes or so, all the animals calmed down. The next morning we discussed amongst ourselves what happened and also talked over the random cries of the livestock for a brief moment. The estate caretaker said that the livestock sometimes get distressed if they see something, and there are many things that roam this house that they don't like seeing. We also told what happened to us last night, expecting to be ridiculed, but to our surprise, no one questioned it. Especially because everyone at some point in their lives experiences something in this house. My mother strictly forbade us to stay up on our own at night, something I had no issues with, but I barely slept the next 2 nights we were there. That was the second to last time I went back to that estate, and nothing unexpected happened the second time I was there, or not to my knowledge at least. Unfortunately, life and adulthood got in the way, and I don't go back to Bangladesh as frequently as I'd like, but I'm planning to go this summer after 4 years, and we are apparently planning to go back to the estate after more than a decade. That is one experience that will always haunt me, only because I saw something and it touched me, and this was just one of the encounters that I've had throughout my life. Alright, story number 4 is I Think My House is Haunted by Refrigerator Dry 6352. Hi everyone. So for a little background, I, 21 female, live with my fiancé, 21 and male, in a small rural town in Ireland. We moved into this house in August last year, and since living here, we have had some super weird experiences. I'm very into the paranormal and always have been since I was a child. My fiancé, on the other hand, is a huge skeptic. Our home was built in the mid-1800s, and it is a protected heritage site, so all exterior walls and windows on the front of the house are original. It's a 2-story house with 3 bedrooms. I don't know much about the history of the house, only that it was rumored to be an undertaker's home, and they used to keep coffins and things in it. However, I haven't been able to confirm this. I should also mention that I have 2 cats currently. The first experience that really spooked me happened in the first month or so of us living here. At this point, we did not have our cats yet. I was home alone, as my fiancé was at MMA training. I was in the living room on the sofa watching TV, and with the layout of the home, the living room leads immediately into the hallway where you can access the stairs, bathroom, and kitchen. We tend to leave that door open as it allows for easier access to the bathroom and such. It was evening time, so it was dark, and I am big on saving money, so I tend to turn off lights when they aren't needed, so the hallway was completely dark. I noticed movement from the corner of my eye from the hallway, so I turned to look, and I saw the silhouette of someone's head at the top of the doorway, as though they were peeking into the living room. Mostly because I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it was gone. I had chills and felt like I was frozen in place. I stayed there until my fiancé came home, and I told him what I had seen, and he brushed me off, saying it was most likely my mind playing tricks on me, because I was home alone. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease after that. From there, things started to ramp up, lights randomly going out only to check the breaker, which is inside our house, and find it has been switched off completely. doors opening and closing, especially our bedroom door at night. Loud bangs downstairs, hearing footsteps on the stairs and in the hallway, stopping outside our bedroom, just creepy, creepy stuff. My fiancée and I are terrified. The cats also seem to be affected by things too. On a few occasions they have both come running from downstairs and into our room at breakneck speeds and hid under the blanket for long periods of time, and these cats are not easily scared. They are super sociable and confident cats. I'm not sure what to think or do about this. I want to believe it's all just coincidence, but there's simply been too many things happening around us to ignore and write off as nothing. I constantly feel like I'm being watched, and I'm just unsure how to proceed. If my house is haunted, I don't know if this thing is malevolent or not, and I'm afraid of opening up any communication or inviting it further into our lives. If anyone has any advice or anything, I would greatly appreciate it. And the fifth and final story today is The Screams and the Woman in Red by SeaSponge56. Hi everyone, 19 female here. It goes back to 4 years. The house that I was born in and raised in, which also happened to be the place I was living in at the time, was being rebuilt completely as the house was more than 35 years old, with very occasional and cheap renovations. For some background, my family was never the happiest or most fulfilled. My parents had problems, and my family of 4 lived together with our grandparents. The only person keeping the family together, well, or at least trying to keep the family together, was my mother. I could clearly see the downfall after my mother left. It was like she took the soul away from the otherwise spiritless building, leaving behind a house in the place of a home. It hit me a month or 2 after her leaving. The place had a different feeling now, a feeling which I didn't quite like. She was the holy force of the house, a spiritual and intelligent woman who would never hurt people in any way, even after being mistreated and sabotaged countless times. She took the life away from the house without even knowing it. But again, maybe I just missed my mother. The rebuilding started after she left. It was midsummer. We rented a small 1-bedroom establishment nearby in the meantime. The top floor of the house was finished first, as it was intended to be kept, less for show and more for functionality. We moved into the top floor while the ground floor was still under work. The top floor was very dull shades of blue on the wall and a feeling of alienation. Now for the weird part. I am someone with 1,000 different hobbies and nerdy pursuits, so I did not pay much attention to anything during the day, busy with school and other activities. But every time the night fell, an unusual feeling of dread used to wash over me. A feeling of dread unlike I've ever felt before. Sleep paralysis was not anything new for me. I used to experience it every now and then, up until my young adult days. But after moving back into the freshly built place, it started happening more frequently than ever, and it was more intense than ever. I would wake up gasping for air in the middle of the night, unable to open my eyes or speak or scream, and it felt like something was sitting on my chest. I could feel a presence I did not like sitting right on my chest before my eyes would finally open, and I'd wake up panting and scared. But I was used to it now. Hated it, but used to it. But the strangest thing started happening about a week after moving in. One night I was up a little later than usual, about 11 p.m. That's when I heard it. A scream, a distant scream. I felt a shiver running down my spine as my body froze the first time I heard it. There was no pain or fear, actually any real emotion behind it. It felt like whoever was screaming just for the sake of it. It was distant, but it felt like I could figure out the exact spot it was coming from. What was even unnerving about the scream was that it continued in a fixed pattern, in the same constant pitch, the same time, about 10 seconds, the same duration of stretch. I did not sleep that night. It continued from about 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. I could not stop thinking about it the next day. It wasn't an animal. It was far away from any machines I could figure out. It was the scream of a woman. At least that's how it sounded to me. I mean, you say it wasn't an animal, but foxes sound like women or children screaming. There are animals that make sounds that sound very, very human. It happened every night, the same duration, the same routine. I could imagine the exact place the sound was coming from in my head. And for some reason, the picture of the spot kept popping in my head. The spot was right outside the back of my house, a very narrow alleyway between two residential builds. Often occupied by drunkards or shady men, the alleyway was a shortcut path to the main road that I do not think I had ever taken. It was completely visible from the attached balcony of the room my father slept in. Now, here is what scared the hell out of me. My father is the kind of man who watches the scariest horror movies in the middle of the night alone just for the love of the game, so it was not unusual for him to boast about how fearless he is of paranormal stuff, or act all cool about it jokingly. One day he told me, "You know, I have been seeing a ghost lady standing outside these nights." I did not pay much attention to it. I thought it was another one of his jokes, so I laughed it off. But the screams never stopped. One night it was hotter than usual, so I couldn't sleep. I woke up to drink some water. As I walked into the kitchen, I found my father awake, watching something on his phone, which wasn't a surprise. He had insomnia. The balcony was wide open, as it was hot that night. I stopped by his room, asking if he wants some water too. He took the bottle, drank some, kept the bottle aside. "Can you see the lady in red too?" he said, pointing at the same alleyway. I froze. My mind went blank. There was a woman in red, standing still, very, very still, hands at her sides, head directed straight to our balcony. I couldn't figure out any minor details like her expression or face or why she was standing right under the streetlight or the alleyway. But that was all. The screams stopped after the housewarming ceremony, and I never saw the woman again, which I am thankful for. But thinking about it still sends a shiver down my spine. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's video. Big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories. If you'd like to support the channel, you can sign up for my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. $1 or more a month gets you early access to the videos all at once on Monday. You'll also find a link to my merchandise store over on Teespring, as well as my Discord server, my Threads account, and my email address should you need to contact me for any reason. That's everything for now. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves.